When I was in art school a long time ago, in the 80s, in the beginning of the 80s, I found this button that said the future is female. And I wore it religiously. I think a couple of years though, it was on everything. And at that point, I think it was a very provocative thing to do. I think it was an almost unfriendly thing to be saying. But I loved it for that. And so here we are about 25, 30 years later, and I'm given to believe that it's changed, that the future is actually female, that we are in fact, our way is being seen as something a little bit more interesting than it used to be. But I really doubt that we have changed all that much as I listen to the news. And I realize that if 50% of the population were in control of even 50% of anything, we wouldn't be talking about abortions anymore. We wouldn't be talking about issues that have only to do with us and are being talked about by men. Having said that, I have to say that I'm not really making any political statements with this work. I'm not particularly trying to tell anybody what to think. There's no social comment here. If there is, it's not something I purposely made. I come to this body of work having been very interested in collage. I was told in art school, sort of back in the purist days, that you never put anything in a painting that's not paint. And I struggled with that for a long time. But then I figured that I saw everybody else putting things in, sand and bits of glass and mosaics, and I thought, and also I'm in a town that's very much about photography. Everything's about photography. Every show I saw, you know, in art school was about photography. Jeff Wall's work was just coming into being and really celebrated. And we were over there painting and trying to make sense of just a minute what's going on, and just a minute what are we doing, and why is it sort of contra? Why is it that it's no longer appropriate? Why are there lines being drawn? We weren't really sure. But we struggled on with it because we were good at painting. We got better at painting. And it's rewarding. Painting is its own reward. You get these incredible feelings of accomplishment when you can wrestle it down. As a technique, it takes an awful lot of time. You can't sort of speed it up. It takes years and years and years to get good. So when you get good, you're not really willing to give it up because it's now your language. And so when I started collaging, I felt like I maybe was doing something a little bit wrong. This work is now a bit of a marriage between collage, well, this body work is a marriage between collage first and painting second. Painting being that painting is a kind of a sensibility. It's how we see pictures. It's the color in the background, I don't know exactly what painting is other than that it's done with paint, but there's a way that it all works together. And so it's a sensibility, I tend to think, and I make my collage with that sensibility. When I started to work with women, I knew that I was maybe speaking a little bit out of turn with some of this subject matter, especially with the nude woman, and especially with the way that she was positioning herself about her body. And I knew that it would be slightly controversial. And I knew that there was something very important in it. I knew that I couldn't just pretend and I couldn't dress her. I knew that it was about being naked. And I knew that about being naked was a big subject. And I knew that about being naked has been a subject from the beginning for women. So I had to tackle it in many ways. I also had to tackle women's attitudes about themselves being naked. I had to actually talk about women's attitudes about being looked at as a woman. And I had to use some of these people as complicit in my ideas, even though they weren't necessarily aware of me, couldn't be, and were anonymous. So I'm taking liberties, but I'm allowing myself to do that. I'm happily allowing myself to do that, because if I've got no other freedom in the world, I have the freedom to do what I want as an artist. Though people may not appreciate that, and may not like them, that's my freedom. That's that's the deal I made. I can be an artist and not really important in the world, in certain worlds, and not really have a real job, but I can do what I want, and that's what an artist is. That's what we can't trade on, and sometimes it really is just instinctive. What I'm doing is instinctive. I might make a color relationship. I might relate to the way something drips or smudges. It might reference something in my memory. It might give me an idea that leads to something else, and it's that physical, because work, making work, is physical. I work with my hands. I move around. When I make collages, it's about ripping and tearing and standing back and looking and going back and saying, oh no, it's not right. I don't walk up to the work and say, I'm going to make this today, and it's going to look like this. I have no idea what it's going to look like. I can only pull threads together it's like weaving or not. I don't know what it's like. It's like something you're putting together in the dark, and then you know when you see it. Materials are terribly, terribly, terribly important. They have been from the beginning. In the beginning, I never had any money. And in the beginning, I worked as a scene painter for the Arts Club Theatre on Granville Island when I was a student. And I never had any materials to work on, so I dragged these sets back to the school, and that's what started me out working on things that weren't actually canvas. I have said in the past that now, of course, I don't want to work on a stretch canvas because it has a whole history that I don't want to deal with. But it just so worked out that way that I could work on something that already had a previous existence for some other thing. And then that started me off of always working with things that had been something else. So I work with Xeroxes. I work with tent canvases and tarpaulins and curtains and anything not canvas. The tent canvases are great because they're canvas, and yet they were used for surveying the north. So everything's got a little bit of a history, and I like that. And I like old things, so I work on old paper. I'm always hunting around for old things, old photographs, old paper. Anything that somehow links me to something that's happened before is very interesting. There's something else going on besides what you see, so the way that she might feel about certain things becomes interesting to me. Or the way that we are looking at her semi-exposed, and that being a fraught notion also becomes interesting to me. Fashion is very interesting to me. I adore clothes. I think that they are not, they're a great source of entertainment to me. I think they are for many people. And I'm not really speaking against the way we wear clothes. I think it's very much part of what those make our identity, and we can pick and choose what we want. I don't judge necessarily certain clothing items being exploitative or not, although of course many are, and we've been a part of this for a long time. This one never seemed to be finished until she got all these different arms going on. And she had so much trouble making up her mind about who she is, about all of these bits and pieces that go to make up us all, about, you know, vile bits of underwear and trying to get zips done up, and, you know, and it's so much about what it is like to be a woman that we're always trying to fit awkward bits of ourselves into dresses that don't quite zip up. And so this is familiar to me, and it's not without humor that I see ourselves in this way. It's done at one time. Nothing new there. We've been doing that for a long time as painters, but they almost have to be done right at the time that I can't almost breathe when I'm doing them, because they're very much, they're all one color. So I squeeze out the paint and I start to do them, and I don't know what I'm going to paint, but they start out, and then I'll see something. I'll see something like a head, or is that hair, or is that the way that, and I can sort of feel it. I can almost feel, I can almost feel it. And just turning 4, and she's nuts about pink, and everything has to be pink. You know, the clothes, the room, the bedspread, the ribbons, the this, the that. And I thought, yes, there's something about pink. And there's something about these sort of things that are just so lovely and luscious and adorable. I'm not against it. I think it's great. So I sort of go with it. And so I'll be sort of, I like to be a little bit, this one looks like she has a pink shadow to me. She's almost like a melted candle. So each one of them has something I like. I like the way that the drips happen here, not particularly something I did, but something I chose to control. So it's about the way paint does stuff that I like. It's my celebration of